$773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, it's an honor to welcome back kind of an avatar to the program. He's a drummer, but also loves to shoot the rock and is a comedian and, kind of just a cat that's just looking to increase humanity and expand consciousness through a myriad of different ways. So great to have him back. John Molo, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thanks for that lovely, wonderful introduction. I was like, hey, I'd like to meet that guy.
I know. Let's just get to it here. We have the game. It's Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to this, and then we'll come back.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to listen to
by the way, I'm thinking that, speaking of voices, that was great Chris Robinson singing there in the intro to the...
Well, thank you for, that was from, and I don't know, you could hear those whoops and hollers. That was Jake Feinberg, front row from the Masonic Lodge this summer with the Green Leaf Rustlers. This is a wild place.
Interesting, yes. That was a fun gig. Chris sounded great on that, and...
I was right in front of Barry's pedal steel.
I was rushing a little bit there, but Barry sounded great, and what great memories.
Well, also, the facial expressions between you and Barry are great. You're just trying to. That was the opening of the second set, so you're just kind of getting loose a little bit. It takes a minute. Yeah. So, anyway, this is a couple minutes long, but check it out, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
With another memory I had. And it came to me so many years later, when I first left home and I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was playing in this band, and I lived in a barn. I had just left home, and I had absolutely no money. I was stealing food from a Total Station, ramen noodles,
right,
and cans of soup. I'd put them into my jacket. I mean, literally, the time-honored tradition of starving musicians. But I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I lived very close to the campus of the University of Michigan. And every day I would walk around that campus because there was a lot of shops and restaurants and record stores around the campus. So I would be walking side by side, almost arm in arm, with kids that were my exact same age, and they were all going to college, and I wasn't. I was living in a freezing barn and starving and stealing food just so I could play guitar in a rock and roll band. And never once did it occur to me that I should be doing what they were doing. I never, ever doubted myself, and I never thought, maybe I should try to go to college like they are because it's a smarter move. It never dawned on me until at least 15 years later when, I grew up and had some hindsight and realized that that's how badly I wanted to do this. And that's how much it meant to me. And it was really a matter of life or death back then.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
I have no idea, and I'm going through my head of the musicians of Michigan.
Well, no, I know. You are, this is, with a heavy heart, that was my second interview with the late, great Neil Casale.
That was Neil.
That was Neil. Starving.
Interesting, because it sort of sounded like I knew him.
Yeah.
But I didn't know Neil that well. But, oh, man, I didn't know that.
Well, before we get
That's
going.
Beautiful.
Well, okay, so there's a number of questions. Number one, I know you, like we've talked about Chris, you have a great musical relationship. You guys will listen to music collectively as a group. You don't really have a personal relationship with him. What was, if at all, what is a defining memory or thing about Neil that you can speak about?
I would say that moment occurred outside of Sweetwater Music Hall in Mill Valley, California, where Neil was on the sidewalk with an SG showing it to Katie Skeen, myself, and Barry Sless, and talking about how this guitar had come to him and the passion that he had for the instrument and sharing was, I don't know, unparalleled. I don't know many guys that stand out on the sidewalk with an SG talking about the virtues of this particular instrument, but he had a passion for it. So I think that would be the most compelling moment. And I think for Katie, recently she sent me a photo after Neil passed away, and I remembered that. I'd forgotten totally about that, but then I saw the photo, and he's talking to the three of us. He's talking to Barry, myself, and Katie about how wonderful this instrument was.
What a beautiful story.
That's what I remember.
Well, no, I've been wanting to ask you this for a minute because we've had we've been trying to plan this part 3 for a minute. On this journey, John, I've interviewed guys like Matt Sakala, Brubeck, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just Hal Blaine, guys that have left this planet. They lived pretty hardy lives, and I didn't know them personally, so I try to pay tribute to them by putting out excerpts from the interviews and things like that. And I haven't dealt with a lot of loss in my own life, knock on wood, to begin with. At 41. So I wanted to ask you, the point is that with Neil, I went to see him maybe 12 or 15 times live this year. He was, just like you said, a passionate guy, but also a really decent human being who would always spend time with you and just doing a lot of things like musically that I was digging on. And so it was a big loss for me. And I wanted to ask you about a time in your career when you experienced great loss, maybe one of your musical comrades.
Oh, that's the thing about getting older. It's going to happen, and you're going to have to, come to terms with it. And with me at age 65, I get a little reflective.
And that's fine. No, you know what it is? The better question is a tragic loss. I'm not talking...
The one for me, I was just saying how fortunate I am at my age. The one that hit me the hardest absolutely was when the great young guitarist R.S. Hornsby died in a car crash outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. And this guy could really play. He had a combination of, Garcia, Matheny, Trey, Timmock.
Wow.
He was simply just incredible. And for me, that was the one because I knew he was going to end up doing some great gigs if he had have lived and stayed on the planet. It was just so undeniable. So that was the hardest for me. And I think the reason was, other than being close with his parents, Bobby and Ann Hornsby, and his uncle Bruce, who mentored him, and R.S. would play with Bruce, and he'd bring the house down. He was great. I just felt kind of weird about the fact that he wasn't able to do a lot of gigs. And that was the thing for me with, to tie it back into Neil. Neil was fortunate enough to have done a lot of
That's right.
He was so good.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, you were spot on.
Yeah, he was just right on it. Sonically, feel-wise, commitment-wise. So I think the difference is, for me, the car crash thing and with R.S. at such a young age. I think he was 27, 28, 29. And not having done the gigs, that really hit me. That, as we go along, all of them are, from Eddie Money to, whoever passes away.
Rest in peace, Eddie Money. That's right. No, I mean,
right, Rick Ocasek. I love those records by the car. I like pop music.
Yeah, I know, man. Come on, you got to lace that pop music with your own little vibe, But I know in your career, there have been ebbs and flows and ups and downs. But I mean, just stepping back from it, how have you been able to, in your own way, maintain equilibrium? Obviously, you have a great wife, family, that. But I mean, to me, this is like the nexus of genius. Not necessarily with Neil, but like when I was commissioned to do a bunch of interviews for this documentary on Stan Getz, and I mean, Getz was a complete sociopath. He was also a drug addict. This nexus of genius and addiction. I know you run into it all the time. I mean, you're with all sorts of amazing artists. And what is it about that burning desire to create authentically, and it's not material based if you're really in it for the art of it, and yet you're a genius, but at the same time you're mired in addiction, or even in some cases depression. I mean, in my mind with Neil, knowing him the way I did and talking to people that knew him better than I did, he gave so much, he left nothing for himself. And he wound up drowning in that. And I just wanted you to riff on the idea of this nexus of genius and or addiction and depression amongst some of the most creative cats that we know on this planet.
Well, as an aspiring, musician, artist, drummer, you need a lot of privacy. And a lot of that, whether you're a painter or a writer with rewrites, a painter redoing, drummers, the repetition, musicians, the repetition, mostly done in private. The more private you can get, the more creative you can get. Sustained periods of time where you're not connected to social media or looking at your phone. You're deep in it. But also with that privacy becomes a lot of responsibility. You can get high. You can listen to records, Coltrane, Bob Marley, whoever, and there's something that happens. But for artists, you really have to watch it. When you open that bottle the first time and you feel that buzz and you're listening to music and you're appreciating it or imbibing any substance, it's alluring. But you got to be really careful that your commitment remains to getting better as a musician. Now, in my day, I mean, people know me. I like great marijuana and I like red wine, but I really try to keep it within the realm of okay, I'm still going for the art of performance.
I dig, man.
My heart and soul. But I think that's the crux of it. And the other thing is, even though we're out there playing for a lot of people, and there's a lot of love going back and forth, and people are into it, and you're connecting, it's still lonely in a lot of ways. You're still, you're in your own head, and you gotta be social. You gotta be fun to be around, and I think sometimes that task is just, it's a thing for sure. So I think the combination of privacy, commitment to the art, loneliness of the performance, and being away from home wears on a lot of people, and they can swerve into some kind of addictions. You just gotta, be careful. It's alluring, but also it's an incredible lifestyle to live if you can live it properly.
Were you at a point? I think you articulated it incredibly well. Privacy was being able to really get to a place of mindfulness with the music was easier when you were coming up because there weren't so many distractions. You didn't have the phones, you didn't have the, you're this full interconnection. But I've talked to so many guys that, Michael Shreve, when he said that him and Carlos went guru shopping because they were looking at all their friends that were becoming roadkill. I mean, there were people dying all over the place, and the point was they were trying to be authentic and true to the music without the drugs. Now, I don't really consider marijuana or a couple glasses of red wine hard drugs, but did you ever have a point in your career where you said, I need to be able to be authentic and true to the music and not in a sober state? Meaning some people just have to be in a certain state of mind, whether that's high or, on drugs in order, in their mind, to get to a very spiritual place in music. And then I've talked to a lot of guys who have just had to go totally clean, and it takes a while, but they've done it and they can still kind of get to that place. Did you ever have that kind of thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been all over the map, and I have to say that the pretty much the total sobriety thing is like you're the clearest. You remember the set
Right.
better.
Right.
I don't know that you play better necessarily, maybe a little differently, but it's still you're giving your heart and soul. So that's the thing for me, the clarity of sobriety. But also, at age 65, my elbow hurts when I'm doing my second set, so I'll slug down a glass of wine. But try to keep it mindful. A lot of times, we're driving after gigs.
Right.
Certain gigs, not all, but I've often said to many people, since we're swerving into this, so to speak, with the DUIs and imbibing and getting high, I don't like putting or having the audience leaving a club in an urban area, a music hall, at 12 midnight. I just think that's the DUI set.
Dude, you're so spot, dude. I feel like you just sent chills up my spine because I've done that with the Green Leaf
We all
Rustlers.
have.
With the
A
Green
lot
Leaf
of us
Rustlers.
have.
Yeah, in the
And if you
urban
do the-
centers. Yeah.
You do the gig 6 to 9
Right.
on the patio, and then let the DJ come up and the ravers rave on, and
Right.
the party goes on.
Right.
That's the best way to do it.
I
Some of
agree.
the best audiences that I've played for have been pretty much sober audiences. I think of Fur Peace in Ohio, which
Yorma's,
is
yep.
Yorma's place.
Sure.
No booze or drugs. I don't even think there's cigarettes. And the way in there is a sign that says no guns, no alcohol, no drugs. Have a ball, something like that. And they're one of the best audiences there is. So
Right.
it's a fine line. Listening, in your car. I remember listening to Creedence Clearwater in my parents' driveway after a six-pack of Budweiser, at least a six-pack, and sitting there singing those songs with John Fogerty. And then years later, I get the audition to play with John Fogerty.
Jeez.
And we're playing the songs, and he goes, "Hey," I don't think he even knew my name. He goes, "You really know these songs, don't you?" I felt like, God, yes, I know them. I drank to them. I did know the songs. I knew pretty much the entire Creedence Clearwater catalog, plus a lot of his stuff. But most of the time when I was listening to it, when I was a kid, there might have been some Marlboros and Budweiser in there,
Well,
Anheuser-Busch and Philip Morris.
I can only imagine what was going on in the fusion days of the University of Miami. It was a.
Oh yeah, well that was a totally different, another story. But
It's okay.
that muscular. Go ahead.
No, I mean, to me, there's just this like incredible thing going on. Like Nelson, for instance. I mean, he's older than you, and I can't even imagine the aches and pains of if you guys are. I don't know if you guys are taking what kind of travel you do, or if you're traveling after gigs. But it's like, this fine line between. Because listen, I mean, I know it to be true. I mean, music. It's like Dave Liebman said, without it, I don't know what I would do. It's healing. It's a healing force. It keeps you alive. It keeps you young, God forbid. And yet it's like, you do want to have a glass of wine. You do want to smoke marijuana. Again, I don't consider that to be, really serious hard drugs, but it's this balance in order to Molo, here's the point. The thing I love about your juxtaposition and your point of view, for the most part, all the musical content, the amalgamations you're in, you really love the guys you're playing with. I mean, you truly love those cats.
Yeah, I do.
And there's a lot of people that stay in music and they're making money and they hate the guts of the people they're playing with. So it's like
And the audience.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's a whole other thing. But it's this longevity, and you want to have fun, and sometimes you need to elevate to get to a certain level. It's just, I'm not even sure if there's a question in this. It's just reflecting on Neil. It still doesn't all add up to me. And again, I haven't experienced a lot of loss in my life, and it was just almost like, why did this even go down? But yet it happens a lot, especially with artists.
Are you still there?
Yeah. I mean, there's really no. I mean, you can riff on that any way you want, but I'm just sort of.
It's that's a hard one to wrap your head around. I don't understand it. He plays great. He looks great. He's a nice guy. So many people that just cross paths with him. I had a friend the other day, and she said he was the nicest guy to me.
Right.
He talked to me. He one-on-one. He was right with me.
Well,
and
Let me ask you. Let
it's
me ask you this question. This is really important. Because I went back east. I saw the last 3 domestic Chris Robinson Brotherhood shows before they were going to take their hiatus, and I went to dinner with Neil and Leone and Hill, and Neil and I sat and talked, and we were talking, and he was talking about his amps. And it's really interesting because, like with guitar players especially, if they're renting amps on the road and the amps suck, it's really hard to get like a spiritual mojo going when when you can't get the sound you want out of your amp. And I was like, why don't you go see Pascal? One of those Fat Jimmy. Go buy one of those Fat Jimmy amps, that CR has or whatever. He goes, dude, I'm broke. He goes, nobody is making any money doing this. And I mean, setting aside all your work, your $25 sessions with Wawa and the Fogartys and the Leshes. I mean, you are a little bit older, but is there a crisis in younger musicians being able to get ahead? I mean, maybe it's self-explanatory. Neil was broke. Neil's financial, and with the CRB coming to a close, that was in my mind, part of his angst was the, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, maybe, and no kids, and
that's the other thing. No family or
when
anybody.
You said that. Yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, all those guitars, all those amps,
right,
all those stomp boxes. Where are they gonna go? They had this relationship. I know it sounds weird with not only the audience but and with Chris and the band and Tony, and it's all that gear. It's hard to wrap your head around, but I just wanted to, you were saying, just to riff on something, you were talking about clarity with the audience and connecting. I was in New York. We were playing the Cap Theater, and I was at the, Courtyard by Marriott in Rye, New York, something like that. And I walk down the lobby, and I see there's 4 Deadheads there, and I look up and I go, oh, I recognize them from last night's performance. They were on the 4th row.
Right.
I would never have remembered them until I saw their faces. And so anyway, we're standing there, and I look over, and I said, hey, I saw you guys at the show last night. Did you have a good time? And they kind of looked at me and went, yeah, we had a good time. Where were you? I said, oh, I was right near you. I think you guys were like in the 4th or 5th row. And they were like, yeah. And I said, yeah, you look like you're having a good time. I was up there having a ball, man. And none of them recognized me, but I recognized them.
That is so. They had no idea you were drumming. They thought you were just in the audience.
And then one of the guys said, "Wait a minute, aren't you John Molo?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I was right up there. I could see you guys. It was just you looked like you had a great time." And it finally dawned on them I was the drummer in the band. But for me, that's kind of funny and weird that I recognized them in a moment of clarity and lucidness. To loop back around, like, yeah, we do see you. We may not acknowledge the audience, but the way you play, and this goes for Neil or anybody, the way you play when there's an enthusiastic audience out there, it's like a home game with no opposition.
Oh, I love that analogy. You got the full field in front of you with 80,000 screaming people cheering you on.
Yeah, encouraging you to do well.
Wow.
And it's just, it's unparalleled, like I said. It's unique, whatever. But the audience, to me, when they're really into it, it's just a beautiful thing. And, the thing about Neil, talking about,
sure,
like, he knew that's what he wanted to do. With music, I knew from an early age. I think we talked about this at Andrews Air Force Base when I saw that jazz trio playing. I was like, drums, love it.
Wait, was this the one with the 2 drummers and one of them was Gad? Or is that a different?
No, that's a different
because
one.
I never heard the Andrews Air Force Base. Please riff on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
My father was in the military. He was a major, I think, in the Air Force. So after World War II, we were able to gain access to the Andrews Air Force Base pool and dinner club where they usually have Air Force musicians playing. Are you there?
I'm listening to every word, baby.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
So they're playing. It's upright bass. And I got up from the table, and I walked over to the drum set, and I was not as tall as the mounted tom, so I was about 4 feet tall, 3 feet. So I had to be about 4 or 5 years old. And I went up and I just stared at the drums, and the drummer looked at me and said, "Would you like the drums?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Would you like to play the drums?" And I thought he meant right then.
Right.
I was ready to get up on the kit. I never touched a drum set in my life. But when he said, "You like the drums?" I went, "Yes." And then he said, "Would you like to play the drums?" As a 4 or 5-year-old, I wasn't wrapping my head around the future. I was just thinking, yeah, move over. I'm ready. I don't think I'd be able to touch the pedals, but I would play. So I knew from an early age that
Well, that was okay. So you're reading the telepathy here is well. First of all, did you have any of the Airmen of Note records? Those were burning records.
Oh, they're so good,
dude. They are
Airmen
the
of Note.
funkiest big band. I mean, Bob Mann. I don't know if you know that guitar player. He was in like the '64 Airmen of Note, and there's like this like I don't know. Those albums are burning hot albums.
Yeah. Well, that's in the Army band with Steve Gadd there. I think 70, 71. The Navy band called the Commodores with the drummer named Gary Elliott was swinging.
Oh,
Those
man.
guys were drinking and swinging. But they because there was no, you got to remember too, there was no drug testing going on.
Right. Wow. I don't think I actually know that. I did not know about that. There was
That
no.
was the bebop.
Right.
hall of
Dude,
the
Molo,
military
thank
service
you for
because-
this, dude. Oh, man.
Yeah,
So-
if you wanted to get like out of the draft or get some benefits, if you're a starving jazz musician, man, you got to audition to play with the Airmen of Note or the Commodores or the Army Field Band playing bebop solos. You know, your ceremonial band. It's pretty much, you know, if you're to draw an analogy to art, it's like, you know, mother and child with flowers.
Right.
But you're still painting and you're still playing. And if the drummer and the bass player were really good, you had a happening rhythm section. And I can't remember all the names of the guys, but I think there was a bass player named Brent McKissick, and there was a drummer named Gary Elliott, and I just remember those guys. And, of course, Steve Gadd. And I don't know who was playing in the Airmen of Note at that time, but they were all those bands had moments of greatness. And how did you get the vinyl or the record or the recording? Did you just...
You know, it was one of these things where you walk into some random record store in some random part of, you know, San Jose or somewhere, and there's for $4.99 there's this gatefold copy of the Airmen of Note from '64, and Bob Mann, who was, you know, in Dreams and was like a decorated guitarist, studio cat, Northeastern guy,
Yeah.
does a lot of work with Steve Tyrell, but there he is, you know, he's playing guitar in that band. And, you know, guitar really was still, how should I say this? You know, the saxophone was really the primary lead instrument at that time. The guitar had not yet, rock and roll was still, in '64, was just on the cusp before it exploded. So it was,
Sure, man.
you
Right
know,
before the blues guys and the English rockers
exactly.
did their thing, you know.
You know, before you know,
interesting. Well, those bands were, you got to imagine, as a kid growing up in D.C., I heard all those bands all the time.
Live.
You go to the park for
Live.
free. They might
Yeah.
be playing. The
Yeah,
Airmen of Note.
oh,
So the guy that's probably, and I hope he doesn't kill me but I'll give him a little publicity. Out
Yeah.
of Washington, D.C., I think the guy's name is, that mixed a lot of those records, this guy named Bob Dawson, who had a studio called Bias. So some of the recordings, I think, were done by him, and they were pretty good. But I think if you go to, I'll tell you this later, if you go to the website, Air Force Band, Airmen of Note, look it up, I think that music is available to the public. And I know that the Navy band has a thing that's a ceremonial that goes anywhere from taps to Hail to the Chief, a snare drum ceremonial.
Song from My Father or
Just
something. I mean, just like insane. Yeah.
But also, one of them is for public use, like taps and revelry. And
Right. Oh,
Hail
yeah.
to the Chief.
Yeah.
They have recordings of those available to the public that are just wonderful. And
I
we'll talk
see
about
those on
that
the
later.
regular. Those don't get me off. Is when I see the small. They do the big symphonic bands.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they do the. I mean, anyway, the fact that just shows of how significant music was in our culture at one time. But
Absolutely. You know.
But you know,
it really was something.
this was because you were this is simpatico here. You knew, so you at four you had a pretty. I mean, Neil had a stable home life too, no doubt about it. He grew up in rural New Jersey, but he knew the only way to get out of his town was to play music. But you know, was the shooting the crashing the backboards in early '80s in Los Angeles with the unemployed actors? Was that because Neil was talking about the barn, right? He was stealing food from the total station, and he realized.
For me,
what was there?
Me,
what was that for you?
At that period, at graduating from high school, I was pretty sure that I wanted to play music. I ran track for a semester. I was at a High Point College, and I was like, this is not where I want to be. I don't want to high jump. I want to play drums.
Right.
So I went back to D.C., and I started playing with a great piano player there named Wade Beach, and I realized I needed to work a lot on this. So I looked at the University of Miami like AA or AAA baseball. It was a developmental place for me to get good and to mature and grow up and show up for gigs and play gigs and be amongst some players that were really good and see where I stood before I moved to New York or Nashville or L.A. I wanted to sort of develop more. I needed to mature more. So that period of time where Neil spent in the barn and knew that he wanted to do it somehow, for me, I was in sunny Florida taking, Econ 101 and, taking music courses and playing with ensembles. So that was my time to really develop. But it was more like single A or double A or triple A.
Yeah, no, I mean, more to the point, where you actually were in college. Neil was crossing paths with cats at University of Michigan, and it never dawned on him once to go to college. And so it was like...
for me, it was one of those things where, in McLean, Langley High School in McLean, or Thomas Jefferson, TJ, everybody goes to college. Langley High School, probably 99% of the kids went to school, so it was just colleges. So it was just something I did.
Right.
It just grew up in that atmosphere of education equals, ambition, and if you're a good student, you'll do well. And I wasn't a good student. I was a good musician. So I was able to get into the schools,
Was it fair, because double A in baseball is where the real talent is cultivated, nowadays. Triple A is not so much. But in the double A sense, were you playing with seasoned musicians during the week, at night? Were you playing?
Yeah, I was always trying to play with players better than me.
Right.
That was the thing I realized, that when I played with this piano player named Wade Beach, he was just so much better than me. And my feel was good, but he was deep.
Yeah, right.
And I realized, okay, that's the way to go. Surround yourself with the good players, people that are the betters, as they'd say down south, and try to be ambitious and practice. I mean, I still practice. I'm going to practice today. I'm going to get into it and work on my craft a little bit and just touch the instrument and remember how much I love playing music. And so anyway, the double A thing, the developmental thing, that was playing with people that were better than me, and I realized even with somebody like Pat Metheny or Steve Morse with the Dregs, they were like, we're going to do demos and we're going to write songs and write tunes and get a record deal and go out and tour. And they knew the path. Same with Hornsby. He was like, write songs, do recording, rehearse, play. That's the way to be successful. Brucey just outworked everybody, and so did Metheny probably, and Steve Morse, hard workers.
Well, and just to put a button on dear Neely, I mean, he would say, and he told me in our 2 interviews, he goes, I mean, when you put me up against Scott Metzger or Tom Hamilton or all sorts of Stu. Everybody loves Stu Allen. I love that line you said last time. You put everybody, but when you put him up against these guys, he doesn't. He doesn't have those chops, but he compensates for it. He told me by doing other things. I mean, he liked always to be second in command. He liked to be that supportive role. He liked to add humor in his music. He liked to obviously take solos, but he compensated, just like the hardworking thing. You can figure out ways to make it to a certain level without having the greatest talent or chops or feel in the world. And he was always. And he was also incredibly self-critical. I mean, I just remember going to shows and my brain was blown open. I had such a ball, and we're sitting backstage and somewhere 14,000 feet above sea level in Colorado, and he's like, damn, my sound was terrible tonight. My amp sucked. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Fucking great. It was a great show,
Yeah.
And it was just
and to remember, too, the first thing I would have said was, oh, yeah. At elevation, it makes your ears weird. Everything sounds weird.
See, that's to me, it was just like, there is. Here's the thing. This past weekend, Del McCoury and David Grisman came to the Fox Theater here in Tucson, which, who knows, maybe one day the Green Leaf Rustlers will wind up here. But I snuck in the back door. I snuck in the back door of the Fox Theater, the loading zone, and I hear David's voice downstairs. David and I have a very good relationship, and I went downstairs, and Del and him and their wives are just sitting there. And they didn't even expect me. David's manager got me these all-access passes, but I just sort of waltzed in there, and we're engrossed in this immediately this deep conversation. Del was hysterical. I mean, the guy was playing with Bill Monroe in '63.
Sure, man.
All right, and
biggest band. Yeah,
man. So we're talking about rhythm, and we're talking about drummers in bluegrass music, and David's like, it really, the genre of bluegrass, you don't have drummers in bluegrass music. That's one of the ways that you can sort of delineate that genre, and part of his point is also that a lot of times drummers are playing too much. There's a certain type of way you have to play within authentic bluegrass settings, and so we were in this. It wasn't a debate by any means, but I think back to one guy, and he was playing more hillbilly jazz. Was DJ Fontana. Did you know DJ at all?
No, but I know of him for sure.
I mean, I want you to talk I want you to push back. I'm not push back, but when I listened to Mule Skinner with another guy who, similar to Hornsby's son, lost his life, Clarence White, tragically got hit by a car. When I listened back to that band, John Guerin's playing drums. I don't know if you ever met John in Los Angeles. He might have been. I don't know if he was still alive.
Great drummer.
Oh,
great drummer.
Crazy dude, and he played really tasteful drums. And the Green Leaf Rustlers are not They're not an authentic. You're not an authentic bluegrass band, but you touch on that sort of thing. And I wondered if you could talk about how to play drums in a string band setting.
Yeah, man. Okay, here's the thing. If you think of it from the point of view of sonically, the drums, the cymbals, if you play them harshly and beat them, will eat up the guitars. My backbeat and hi-hat will eat up the traditional spot that the mandolin has. The kick drum, if it's oom, 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 can kill the bass. So you have to watch it a little bit and watch your frequencies and make sure that you're not dominating in a draconian or Procrustean way this genre of music that we would call folkloric bluegrass. Now, having grown up in Virginia, there's a rich history of that music, and you just sort of, it's just sort of in the air, floating into your ear.
Right.
And you just sort of learn the feel of it if you have open ears and you can receive it. And sending it back out through the drum kit is a different thing. But I think for Elvin Jones, my dog.
Yeah, no, let him come over. The dogs love these shows. Yeah.
He's out there breaking it up. You got to be careful and know the genre of bluegrass if you're going to play it and really respect it. There's a certain feel to it. And there's certain things you can borrow from. I use the kick drum pattern of Church of God in Christ.
Wow.
From the Black Baptist thing that I learned from Leon Russell, and he learned it from those guys somehow. And that kick drum, if you're playing it, instead of like is and recently I was playing with Jackie Green and Luther Dickinson.
Sure.
And they said, hey, Luther came over and said something like, yeah, that boom chick thing. And I said, well, I got a little thing I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And I dropped in the name, of course. I said, Leon sort of showed it to me and Hornsby. We used it on a song called White Wheel Limousine, that kick drum pattern. So I said, let's give it a try. And he was all there. So we're playing the tune, and it might have been Cumberland or something like that by the Dead. And I started doing that pattern, and Jackie just started moving up there like Shirley Caesar. He was just in the groove. And I looked over, and Luther, same thing. The whole band was just grooving. So I think when you get into that folkloric kind of bluegrass tradition, just be aware that you really got to play the song. And the reason I mentioned the kick drum is because if you're going boom, 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 it turns into either a polka or disco music after a while.
Absolutely.
Got to watch that.
Absolutely. Well, no, but so how does it differ in terms of hitting? I mean, because you're not bashing, but I mean, Green Leaf is an amplified band.
Oh yeah.
It's
So you
as
gotta-
opposed to a string band, which is acoustic, where you have to be like Jackie Green's playing string instruments. I don't know what if that was an acoustic show all the way, but
No, it was electric, but we were swerving into the bluegrass
right.
tradition a little.
So how does it differ with Green Leaf in terms of is that just sort of more like psychedelicized country rock kind of stuff, or is there?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
If you think like Burrito Brothers, Sir Douglas Quintet,
Yeah.
Birds, West Coast roots music, Graham Parsons, Burritos, all that. It's more out of that with a psychedelic touch to it. And of course, we're honoring Merle Haggard and, mostly not so much the Nashville country thing, but more the West Coast thing. And, whether it's me playing or Tony Leone playing with Chris has a certain style and phrasing, and it just puts it into that place. And so you just go with that. He's fun to work with in that way for sure.
Well,
Greenleaf, but also with those guys, they like that R&B sensibility, So you got to throw a little bit of that in there as well. So
you mean the when you say R&B, what pocket? I mean, because that could be soul, older, like older.
Stax,
yeah,
Memphis,
yeah,
more,
kind of Al Jacksonish kind of thing.
Yeah, what is that cup called? Memphis Soul Stew.
All right, King Curtis. Absolutely.
It's a little bit older.
I dig.
If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. I can't wait for you to hear this next voice. You have a great nickname for him, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
When I was studying with the good Reverend, he lived out in Queens, and I would go and get a lesson or two when I was in New York, and I'd get a ride out there. And he required that. He lived in his house in Queens, and his wife strictly forbade him from smoking, in particular, smoking and drinking. And so, when we came out there, we would. It was. I got tipped off by Yorma, who also sat at the feet of the good Reverend. Yorma Kalkinen. And it was kind of well known that if you wanted to get a good lesson from the guy, what you did was you would bring a box of cigars and maybe a hip flask of brandy, and you bring him a couple of good cigars and a slug or two of brandy, and also he required that you bring a cute bit of fluff with you, a comely young girl, a slick young filly, and he could tell.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was blind as a bat, but he could tell. And the old boy would perk right up, and you'd get a much better lesson that way.
You know who that is?
That's hilarious. There were a couple words he said in there that sort of resonated with me. I think he said Philly.
He said fine. Yeah, he said a fine young filly,
and that sort of hit me. But I don't know who that is. But that's a funny story.
Okay, well that was from my interview from March 2014 with Bobby Champagne Weir.
Oh, I should have recognized.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, because I mean, Bobby, just the cadence too. I mean, it's just so interesting the way he runs these lines, and I mean, aside from, like, were you playing with the other ones? I'm just, to me, it's always like, I mean, obviously you have a very close musical relationship with Phil, but looking back on it, Bobby to me is striking in so many ways. He did not. Barlow told me in our interviews that in some ways, the guys in the Dead were. They really just looked down on him because he was an inferior, in their mind, really inferior musician. So, I mean, Bobby had a scrap and claw for everything he got. And obviously sometimes, you're cooking a groove and next thing you know, he's reaching over and he's trying to start a new groove that's more to his liking. But You know, what is Champagne Weir? I mean, when did you start playing with him and just, you know, riff on that?
Hip to Bobby's thing was through Bruce Hornsby. We performed on an album called Dedicated, which was just different artists from Jane's Addiction to Suzanne Vega to Tom Petty Rhythm Section, Dwight Yoakam. We all did Dead songs. And I forget, Bruce had one in mind, but somebody else had picked it already. So we did Jack Straw. And that's, you know, I thought, oh, Jerry wrote this. Well, Jerry didn't write it. Bobby wrote it. And I became more aware of Bobby's thing, and then I realized, oh, Truckin', that's Bobby. That's pretty cool. So I realized early that, or at least when I started swerving into getting into the Dead thing, that Bobby, you know, he had a cool rhythm style, wrote some cool songs, and we would go out, and I forget, it was Bruce Hornsby he would sit in with, and we would play Jack Straw. And back then, Bobby was a little different. He wasn't as much, you know, slow it down and keep it quiet. He was younger then. It was probably 95 or 96. And we would go for it. And really, you know, at the end, Jack Straw from Wichita, more like almost like the Who.
Oh, I love it. No, exactly, dude.
Yeah, it was a different take. And he was cool with it. And then I started, you know, getting into some other ones, Estimated Prophet, you know, the way they played it, it's pretty cool. You know, Odd Time Signatures. Bobby just seemed to have a feel for that. And,
you know, I do want to say, no, because I mean, the thing is that actually Barlow, rest in peace, he told me, because of Bobby's dyslexia, a lot of times Barlow was not only writing. Now the Jack Straw, I have to go back because that might have been Hunter with Weir, but a lot of times not only was Barlow writing the lyrics, but Barlow was also fitting in like Estimated Prophet. It was like these. Bobby was a showman. Bobby was he was clearly a showman, and he had a ton of energy, and he was like, I don't want to slight him or take anything away from his, and you know, a lot of times he was able to hold down the one in that band because Phil was playing lead bass and Jerry was playing lead guitar.
Oh, yeah, a lot of times Bobby and Jerry were who knows where. Bobby was holding it together for sure.
Exactly. So, you know, but actually those songs in some ways he didn't have a lot of I mean, you know, it was just interesting. I have to go back and listen to the quote, but I mean, Barlow was really just talking about not only was he writing the lyrics, Barlow was, but he was also creating a danceable groove for these lyrics.
Yeah. Who wrote "Playing in the Band"?
Bobby did. That was Bobby and Barlow. I mean,
that little that thing in 10.
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 1. It's like a bar, 2 bars of 4 and a bar of 2, or a bar of 4 and a bar of 6. You can chop it up in a lot of different ways, but that's a good dancey song, and it's in 5 or 10. And yeah, he's done some cool stuff for sure. You know, I haven't heard the Wolf Brothers. Have you heard that?
I haven't. I have a feeling it might be fascinating. It's definitely would be outside the context. I really like Jay Lane. He's a good drummer. But I haven't.
Great disposition.
Yeah, just exactly, exactly. And you know, the point was that here's Bobby at 19 years old with the Warlocks, or probably just the beginnings of the Grateful Dead, and he's telling this story about the Reverend Gary Davis. So
that's who that story was.
Exactly. Yorma hipped him to it. Speaking of fur piece. So I mean, they when Jefferson Airplane or the Dead would go to New York, Bobby would take a cab over to Queens, go down into the basement, bring some nice, fine young Philly down there, so you know, bottle of whiskey and some smoke, and he'd get a great lesson from him. And
that's pretty funny.
Yeah, well, but it also speaks to the lineage of music and how, I mean, that was Bromberg, that was Yorma, that was Weir, and I'm like, Molo did not necessarily a drummer, but did you know, like Reverend Gary Davis, I think was from like North Carolina. I mean, did you ever come across some of those Chitlin Circuit, you know, sort of just scrappy, you know, blind dobro musicians. These guys were just like the shaman cats. It's like Freddie Roulette stuff. Freddie's still with us, but it's like these guys were shamans to all the Lindley and to all these cats.
Yeah, and I missed a lot of it, but some of it I caught, and it would be in D.C., in Georgetown, Cellar Door, Bayou. And I was like, that opened my eyes. And so, yeah, there were a lot of people, but like I said, my awareness was more into pop and jazz and, the educational side of music. And I wasn't aware of the other stuff really until I got out of college. So I missed some really good opportunities in Virginia and D.C. to hear some of the great legendary blues artists, for sure.
This is a quote from, I want to get your opinion on this. Talking to John Molo here on the Jake Feinberg Show. This is our third installment. We've also had a couple of Man on the Streets. The guy is incredibly accessible and clairvoyant, and also very much into understanding that the fans are a big part of the music and always paying attention to them. This is from Steve Swallow. He said, "The drummers are, in my opinion, the intellectuals in the music. This runs contrary to the stereotype of the drummer as sort of the noble savage. Point in fact, the drummers are the mathematicians of the band. Pete LaRocca and I found each other when it was easy to break the rules." This was probably the early 60s, 62, 63. "It was easy to go as far out on a limb as you could choose to go. There was an atmosphere on the bandstand that not only encouraged that, but demanded it. The infection was not contained in the rhythm sections. The horn players were feeling it too. They were eager for the kind of surprises and sense of uncertainty that hadn't been there a few years before. Guys like Blue Mitchell and Junior Cook, who are two of my favorite players, wanted that reassurance from Gene Taylor. The way they played wanted that. So let me ask you, are the drummers the intellectuals of the music?"
Yeah.
I want the honest. I don't
Okay,
want to don't be humble. I want
yeah.
that you've been around enough to subdivide. You know what you're. I want, and Swallow's a genius as well. So just riff on that.
Okay. Drummer makes or breaks the band. Great singer and great drummer. You look at Frank Sinatra, the drummers he had. Those guys are major connections. So without a good drummer, the band cannot be good. And for a lot of these players, when they start out, they don't even understand what the drums are. I still have occasionally a musician that will turn to me and ask me to speed it up. I'm like, I don't care whether you're a solo artist, you're doing a duet, or you're a 60-piece orchestra. Accelerandos have to be written for all. If the drummer accelerates and the rest of the band doesn't, it's cacophonous rhythm-wise. So a lot of people who are very good musicians still don't understand the concept of drumming at a higher level, where the drummer's actually enhancing the intonation of the band, allowing the band to play in tune, making the singer, or getting the singer to sing as good as he or she possibly can. It's a heavy instrument and a big responsibility, and I think it's one of the most difficult instruments to get really good on. You have basically 8 instruments up there that you're playing at one time. Right. Really like a one-man band. You got a hi-hat, a couple crashes, a ride, kick, snare, So it's a very difficult instrument to get good on, and I think a lot of musicians harbor animosity towards drummers because of experiences early on. It's like dealing with your parents or something. Oh, my parents did this, or I was neglected. And you look back, oh, that drummer ruined that gig, drummer ruined this gig. Because they're just at an early age, it's not guitar, it's a different type of instrument. And so, like I said, there's a lot of responsibility that comes from it. As far as the intellectual side of it,
I want to go back to something. The crescendo thing. When somebody says, "I want you to speed it up," you're saying this has to be something done within the collective conversation, not by.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, I want to make sure.
I'm not. Why would I?
Yeah.
Because somebody in the band wants it to speed up. They look at me. I'm like, I'm playing music. You can't just hit the tempo button, beats per minute, and jack me up. And also, if you'll notice, sometimes people will do that, and you look around at the rest of the band, and everybody's got their head down grooving. Now, they ask me to speed it up. They're going to look at me and go, "Molo, why did you speed it up?" And so
Exactly.
there's a responsibility, like I said, that comes with it. Most recently, a singer did that with me, and I said, you got to tell everybody. Remember, that was our agreement before we came on stage. After the show, I said, you have to tell everyone to speed it up.
Dig. Oh, wow.
And so for me, it's a responsibility that comes, but also you gotta alpha dog it a little bit, but be cool with it and respect the singer. And right, that's my explanation. So it's intellectual responsibility and awareness of the power of your instrument. And
I mean, we got to get you. I mean, you should be at UCLA teaching. This is like poetry right here. Is it something about? Can that cause issues within a band where the singer and the drummer are sort of like the singer's too insecure to, or in some ways to address it to the entire unit? So they're just talking to the drummer, and then all of a sudden it just sort of, to me, that's you just said it before. You said a good singer and a good drummer are the keys to a good band. But if the band is go ahead.
When I worked with John Fogerty, he liked me. I was Golden Boy. And, the rest of the band was like, play it slower. And I'm like, you're the rhythm guitarist.
Right.
I'm not going to play it slower because you want it slower. I'm going to play it where John likes it. John likes it on top and energetic and young. So I'm going to do my best to work with him. So, it can a little bit. But, that just comes with the territory. Like I said, I don't want to alpha dog it. And you got to remember, some musicians will be alpha dog. Like Ted Nugent would like to be alpha dog. He's not the best player. He just wants to be alpha.
Right. Well,
so a lot of times.
Oh God, I cannot wait to send you my interview with Nugent. You are going to lose your mind. Go ahead.
Well, he's done more to hurt the hunting movement than anybody I can possibly think of. And I know he's a fellow Michigander in a way. And with the Amboy Dukes, he sounded pretty good early on.
Yeah.
He looked pretty good at that starting gate. But I was just going to say, there's certain characters. I mentioned Ted because, he runs that band, certain guys. But like in West Side Story, do you know West Side Story, the movie?
Oh, very hundreds of times, yeah.
Okay, so in the fight scene between the gangs,
right.
Bernardo thinks he's going to fight Tony or Riff. But when they show up the Rumble, it's like, no, you're fighting Ice. Remember the big, huge guy?
Yeah, this is just a flash. I'm having a flash right now. Yeah, go ahead.
And so Ice was the toughest guy in the Jets, but Riff was the alpha dog, and Tony had been alpha before. But I remember that scene vividly. Bernardo thought he was going to fight one of those guys, and all of a sudden he's faced off with big old Ice, who was the toughest. So that's my analogy. There you go.
I love it.
Thanks, buddy.
When did you? It's always fascinating with Molo, these little, niches and little, attic lights on. Were you on tour when you connected with Leon Russell, or how did that relationship go down?
Bruce Hornsby is a huge Leon fan.
Sure.
And we started with Bruce early on when we became kind of a pop sensation. We only had 10 songs. So we'd have a lot of people that would show up and we basically didn't have enough material. So Bruce started incorporating some Leon Russell, some Dad, some other covers, just so we would have a bigger, more entertaining body of work and didn't have to repeat ourselves.
Right, bigger bag of tunes.
Leon sort of showed up in our sets and probably caught word of it, and then Bruce had the opportunity, I think, to write with him, and Bruce co-produced one of the albums that Leon did. And it's a cool album, some good stuff on it, and that's how, I guess, that connection was made. Just like most of the connections I made in the music business were through Bruce in the range.
Did Leon actually sit down at the kit and show you that beat that we were talking about?
No. I think Bruce learned it from him, and then Bruce talked to me about it, and then I started listening to some of that. I don't even know how to pronounce the name. It's Black Baptist, and it's called, I think, Church of God in Christ.
I'm going to have to look that up. That is really
Kochak or something like that. Kochak, like I said, I'm butchering it, but it's Church of God in Christ. And, you'll hear it and go, oh, yeah, I can hear Leon borrowed from that. Wow! Just the very, I don't know. It's really good. Enjoy it.
Well, before I let you go, I mean, I just, having a little bit of a back and forth here on Facebook with Pete Sears in a very jovial way. He because I did a Facebook Live interview with him, and he said I was paraphrasing some of the stuff. But what's really interesting, I want to break this down. Not that you are, I mean, you are a street scholar, but you also were in academia. I mean, it seems to me that in these collaborations, these psychedelicized rock folk settings, whether it's Green Leaf or Moon Alice or private parties or whatever, you and Sears are bass drums are the equivalent of Garibaldi and Rocco. Because when I interviewed David, first time I interviewed Garibaldi, he was talking. He's like, here I am, working out these grooves, but obviously, schooled and Dick Grove big band and all sorts, like reading music and I just noticed Rocco had this feel where he was always right there with me. And I said, one day I was like, how come you keep doing that? He's like, I don't know, it just feels like I should do that. And I'm listening back, I'm transcribing my interview with Sears, and he's just like, when it comes to the bass, he's like, at this point, it's just coming out of me, like I really don't have much. He doesn't. He's like, I had no academic training. I just have great feel, and I'm like, both you guys. It's really one of the coolest, most dynamic rhythm sections going in the world today, and I kind of wanted you to talk about, when you first started playing together, maybe you didn't know what Pete's background was, but when you realized that he really had no formal education as it related to the bass.
Yeah, we started talking about it. Now, I met Pete as a keyboard player, accordion guy, and a roots guy. But Bobby Vega, the great bass player,
sure.
said, "Oh, wait till you hear him play bass." Bobby says, "I think of him as a great bass player." And I said, "Oh, I didn't even know. I just thought he was a super cool musician."
Right.
And he goes, "Oh, no." So once I started playing with him, we swerved into this. We got into, I'm using the word swerve too much, but you just kind of move in the direction where the music is taking you. So we started playing with Pete and Barry, and I thought, this sort of sounds like Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell,
absolutely,
Elvin, Tony, Joe Morello, Butch Trucks, and J-Mo. I'm going to put all of this into that. And, of course, the drummer that Pete and I have in common, he was friends with Mickey Waller, who played on the Rod Stewart stuff.
Absolutely.
Drummer. And I was just a huge fan. I mean, Bonham, great. Mickey Waller, really kind of English rock drumming, whatever you want to call it. So bringing all of those elements together with Pete just seemed to ignite something in the rhythm section that was very identifiable. And we do a couple of jams, maybe the end of Summertime Blues,
right,
where it totally gets into like a Wheels of Fire, Cream feel. And really enjoy playing with him. We don't talk a lot about it. I mean, sometimes we will, but mostly we just kind of play it by ear. And he's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's all by ear. I think that's what makes it so organic and natural. That's the beauty of music. By the way, just for the record, at that Masonic Lodge, I yelled out, you may not have heard it, but I CR shot me a smile. I was yelling out, play some Buddy Rich to you. So I mean, like, I do think that there is, I don't know, I think that story you told about the 4 fans downstairs that you went up to and were accessible. I feel like in the spirit of Neil Casal that it would behoove you, as you work with all these younger cats, to that make sure that whether they got the memo and forgot or whether they never got the memo, that they are always creating relationships with fans. I talk to so many unknown artists who go on these fleeting tours. They don't have the budgets to go across the country, and I say, every dive bar you're at, every place you're at, you need to go, not only engage during the show, but after, and really engage the peeps. So you get invited back, and so you can build a fan base, because we're saturated with material now. And if you're not seeking, then it's going to be hard to build. And I just feel like in the spirit of Neely Casal, I just feel like that might be the most important thing now, is this, for this where do we go from here?
Yeah.
It's connect. It's stay in touch with the audience. Don't be a douchebag. Don't be an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I think Brian Jones, who plays guitar with Vampire Weekend, who I worked with, is really fun. He's on. I mean, he's a great bass player. He's playing guitar with Vampire Weekend, but he's really good and he's accessible. Young Katie Skeen that I play with California Kind, she gets a little before the show. She's not great. She's preoccupied with the material. Afterwards, she can hang. She's really fun. Nikki Bloom, same way. I think before the show, she's pretty serious. But after the show, she's just a great hang. And I think it's important for the artist to get out a little bit. I'm sure it's a little bit different for some of the women. But as far as I go, I can pretty much tell off the get if you're going to be cool or you're going to be weird.
Yeah, man, you're spot
and
on.
Most people
man.
are very nice. If somebody comes up and gives me a compliment, I always try to honor it and never be dismissive.
Well, it was just really interesting. I saw you guys at Pappy's, and me and you had not really formally met, we had met at Moe's, but I still didn't.
Moe's Alley, right?
But I didn't have your number, and I wanted to do this radio interview with you, and it was like so synergistic. It was like you guys played this rocking set, and you left the bandstand, and I'm sitting there saying, "Man, Barry sort of gave me a nod. Like you said, you don't. The musicians won't always acknowledge you, but they know you're there, right? So I mean, like Loya Kano leaves, and CR leaves, you leave, and you leave the bandstand, and then." I was like, how am I ever going to get Molo's number? I just don't want to be I don't want to be a hag or anything. And next thing you know, magically you walked back in the door and you went up to me. You're like, hey man, and we exchanged numbers. And I was like, did Barry? It was so spiritual, but it was like, I'm like, dude, that guy I don't know. Sometimes it's just the spirit, but it was super, super cool. And I and a lot of people are guarded. A lot of people are just introverted. A lot of people are just weird. But those barriers have to come down, because if Casal stood for one thing, Neil Casal was not Kenny Burrell. He was never going to be, some virtuoso, and but what he was a big ball of love and spiritual energy, and he gave that to
really
so many people, man. And that's it.
A young guitarist one time heard Neil, and he goes, "I think I could do that." And I said, "Yeah, but you got to remember, it's not as easy as it sounds. What Neil is doing is like commitment, sound, feel. He was really something."
Well, let me also say that he had a career that nobody really ever knew, and then very serendipitously, Phil Lesh brought him up on the bandstand, got him into Terrapin, and the great story about that is that I don't know if you ever played with John Graboff, but John was sort of really working stuff out of Terrapin with Phil when they didn't even have a stage in the bar or anything. And Phil's like, when Neil first came out, he's like, John, Neil seems to be very uptight on the bandstand. Why is he holding back so much? And John said, Phil, you got to understand, Neil wants to please you and do so well at this stuff. He's just a little bit tight. Give him a little bit of time. It'll work out. And sure enough, because Neil wasn't even in the jam scene. So it's, it's Heartbreak Hotel, but things mend, time heals all wounds. What's the next few gigs on your schedule, Molo? I sort of need to meet my Molo quota. I haven't.
Yeah, I'm with Dave Nelson on the 21st at Terrapin Crossroads. And Hardly Strictly, we've got a band together with Lebo, George Porter, myself, Wally Ingram.
Wait,
and we're going to do Hardly Strictly.
Those are my peeps, dude.
Well as,
are you Wally Ingram and Porter and Molo?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Where is that festival? Is that in San Francisco or something?
Yeah, that's Hardly Strictly is downtown San Fran in the park, and it's free. And it's a bunch of stages, and I think it's called Golden Gate Park. You just walk around. Once you get in, there's probably 5 or 6 stages, all sorts of bands.
Do you know the date on that one?
Yeah, that is, we're looking like that weekend, October 6th.
Well,
so put that down on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, either way, if I'm out in the, I do want to, we'll shoot some hoops sometimes too. Sometime I get out there.
I better start practicing.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah,
man.
Hardly Strictly. I think Sunday the 6th. I'll be there with Lebo and friends. And also, I think I've got a Moon Alice gig there as well, maybe on Saturday. So anyway, plenty busy.
Good. Well, I mean,
I'm a fortunate guy. And I have to tend to, I get to walk my wife out to the car.
yeah, go. No, listen, we'll put a button on this. It's part 3 in the books, Molo. Have a beautiful day,
You got
man.
it, brother.
All right, bro. Later on.
Take care.
Peace.
All right. Bye. Peace out.
Yep. Tremendous human being and pretty good drummer, John Molo. Rest in peace, Neil Casal. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.
Thank you.